Trump's latest signals after Venezuela leave allies uncertain. What happens when one operation doesn't stop at one country? Over the past several days, Venezuela has moved to the center of global attention after a dramatic U.S. action that officials in Washington describe as limited and targeted. But almost immediately, the story began to expand far beyond Venezuela's borders. Public remarks from President Donald Trump, combined with rising tension across Latin America, have raised new questions about what the United States may do next and how far its influence could reach. As other countries are mentioned by name, governments across the region are reassessing their security, their alliances, and their relationship with Washington. Tonight, we take a closer look at what has happened so far, why reactions have been so intense, and what this moment could mean for the future of U.S. leadership in the Western Hemisphere. The United States government says its recent operation involving Venezuela was carefully planned and narrowly focused. According to senior officials, the mission was designed to enforce U.S. law and secure the transfer of Venezuela's leadership into U.S. custody. It was not, they emphasized, an occupation, a takeover, or the beginning of long-term control. That explanation was intended to set clear limits on the scope of American involvement. However, those limits quickly became the subject of debate. Within hours of the operation, public remarks from President Donald Trump appeared to suggest a broader interpretation of U.S. authority. When asked directly about who was now in charge, his response raised questions rather than providing clarity. For allies and critics alike, the mixed messaging created uncertainty about Washington's intentions. In Washington, the reaction was swift. Democratic lawmakers accused the president of overstepping legal boundaries and warned that similar actions in the past have often carried long-term consequences. Their concerns centered on precedent. Once the United States engages directly in reshaping political outcomes abroad, it can become difficult to define an exit strategy or control the ripple effects. Beyond Capitol Hill, reactions across Latin America were immediate and intense. Venezuelan officials condemned the operation as a violation of national sovereignty and warned that it could destabilize the broader international system. Defense leaders argued that if powerful nations act unilaterally without broad international agreement, global norms designed to protect smaller states could erode. That message resonated across the region. Leaders in neighboring countries expressed concern that Venezuela might not be an isolated case. The fear was not rooted solely in ideology or political alignment, but in predictability. Governments depend on clear rules and expectations in international relations, and many warned that this event could weaken those foundations. At the same time, public reaction revealed deep divisions. Among Venezuelans living in the United States, particularly in Florida, the operation was celebrated by some as a moment of hope. Members of the diaspora described it as a possible turning point after years of political and economic instability. For them, the development represented a chance for change that had long seemed out of reach. Inside Venezuela, the experience looked very different. Residents described widespread disruption to daily life as events unfolded rapidly. Families spoke of displacement and confusion, unsure how long the instability would last or what it would mean for their safety and livelihoods. For many civilians, the story was not about geopolitics or ideology, but about uncertainty and the immediate impact on their lives. As Venezuela absorbed the initial shock, attention quickly shifted to what might come next. In public remarks, President Trump began naming other countries while discussing U.S. national security priorities. Colombia, Cuba, and Greenland were all mentioned. While no specific actions or timelines were announced, the language itself drew attention across diplomatic circles. In Colombia, the response was swift. The government increased security readiness along its border, citing concern about regional stability. President Gustavo Petro issued a warning of his own, calling on Latin American nations to unite rather than face pressure individually. His message reflected a broader concern that countries acting alone could be more vulnerable to outside influence. These reactions are closely tied to a larger strategic framework now guiding U.S. policy. Last month, Washington released an updated national security strategy that placed strong emphasis on maintaining American preeminence in the Western Hemisphere. The document argued that U.S. security and prosperity depend on access to strategic resources, stable supply chains, and influence close to home. Supporters of this approach say it reflects geopolitical reality. They argue that global competition, particularly with China, has intensified and that the United States cannot afford to lose ground in its own region. From this perspective, decisive action is seen as a way to deter rivals and reinforce American leadership. Critics, however, warn of unintended consequences. They argue that pressure, whether political, economic, or military, can push neighboring countries toward alternative partners. Instead of reducing rival influence, aggressive tactics may encourage it, accelerating shifts in regional alliances. Recent developments suggest this concern is not theoretical. Brazil, facing economic pressure from Washington, has expanded cooperation with China. Argentina has accepted substantial U.S. financial support, while other governments quietly reassess their diplomatic and economic strategies. Each move reflects a region navigating between competing global powers. For U.S. policymakers, this creates a complex challenge. On one hand, there is a desire to project strength and maintain influence. On the other, there is the risk of generating resistance and uncertainty among allies. Balancing those forces requires clarity, consistency, and a clear understanding of long-term consequences. For American citizens, the stakes are also significant. Foreign policy decisions influence economic conditions at home, affect trade relationships, and shape global perceptions of the United States. While decisive leadership can project confidence, unpredictability can carry costs, from market uncertainty to strained diplomatic ties. As tensions rise, one question continues to surface among analysts and diplomats alike. Is the United States entering a new phase of assertive leadership in the Americas, or stepping into a period marked by uncertainty and strategic pushback? The answer will not be immediate. What is clear is that Venezuela has become more than a single event. It has become a reference point, one that governments, investors, and global powers are watching closely. How Washington navigates the next steps may determine not only its relationship with Latin America, but also its broader role on the world stage. Venezuela is no longer just a regional story. It has become a signal about power, influence, and the direction of U.S. policy in the Western Hemisphere. As Washington hints that its focus may extend beyond one country, the consequences of this moment are still unfolding. Allies are reassessing their positions. Rivals are watching for opportunity, and citizens across the Americas are left wondering what comes next. Is this a demonstration of control meant to secure stability, or the opening chapter of a more unpredictable era? The answer may define America's role in the region for years to come. Thank you for watching. Stay with us as this story continues to develop.